Ferrari just got hit with the kind of news that can destroy an entire Formula One season. The FIA is preparing to ban the exact innovation that made the SF26 dangerous. And according to reports inside the paddock, Ferrari could instantly lose almost half a second per lap if the system disappears completely. Half a second. That is catastrophic in modern Formula One. That is the difference between fighting for pole position and falling straight into the midfield. But this story gets even more explosive, because the FIA is not targeting just one Ferrari innovation. They're going after two. The controversial halo wing that shocked rival teams after China, and the blown exhaust system that multiple teams rushed to copy after Miami. And now, behind closed doors, the atmosphere inside Ferrari is reportedly reaching breaking point. Because Ferrari believes they are being punished for doing the one thing Formula One has always rewarded: finding the loophole before everybody else. But here is the detail that changes everything. Lewis Hamilton trusted Ferrari's controversial halo wing enough to race with it. Charles Leclerc did not. That split alone has already created huge tension inside the paddock. Meanwhile, Ferrari is still believed to be down as much as 30 horsepower compared to Mercedes. So if the FIA removes the aerodynamic systems compensating for that weakness, the entire SF26 project could collapse much faster than anyone expected. And what happens next in Canada may not just decide Ferrari's season. It may decide whether Ferrari's entire comeback was built on innovations Formula One no longer wants to exist. For Ferrari, this was supposed to be the moment the entire season finally changed. Not survival. Not excuses. A real comeback. Because after months of pressure, criticism, and constant questions about whether the SF26 could actually fight at the front, Ferrari finally started seeing signs of something dangerous. Momentum. The Miami package worked better than expected. Straight-line speed improved dramatically. The rear of the car looked more stable through medium-speed corners. Tire degradation became more controlled over long runs. And suddenly, people inside the paddock started whispering something Ferrari fans had been desperate to hear for months. Ferrari might actually be catching up. And that is exactly when the FIA started paying closer attention. The center of the controversy was something so small most viewers never even noticed it during broadcast. The halo wing. A tiny aerodynamic surface mounted on the center pillar above the cockpit. Almost invisible on television. But inside Formula One garages, engineers immediately understood why it mattered. Because Ferrari had discovered a loophole hidden inside the new 2026 regulations. The FIA introduced a thinner halo pillar this season. Ferrari realized the wording of the rules allowed teams to attach a fairing to that structure. Most teams interpreted the rule conservatively. Ferrari did not. Instead of treating it like a simple cover, Ferrari transformed the area into an aerodynamic weapon. Tiny winglets redirected clean airflow toward the rear wing while also reducing turbulence around the cockpit. That sounds small. But in Formula One, tiny airflow changes create massive consequences. Imagine sticking your hand outside a moving car window. Tilt your hand slightly and suddenly the air changes direction completely. Tiny angles create huge differences in pressure and stability. That is basically what Ferrari exploited. And according to reports, the gains were real. Only a few hundredths of a second per lap, but in modern Formula One, a few hundredths can completely reshape qualifying results. Especially at tracks where the top teams are separated by microscopic margins. And this is exactly why rival teams became nervous so quickly. Because Formula One teams only react aggressively when they believe an innovation actually works. If a system is useless, nobody complains. But Ferrari's halo wing immediately became one of the biggest technical talking points in the paddock after China. During the Chinese Grand Prix, Ferrari reportedly entered discussions with the FIA after concerns emerged that the original version may have gone too far legally. Sources described the design as borderline. That single word changed everything. Because borderline in Formula One usually means the FIA is warning you quietly before acting publicly later. Ferrari understood the danger immediately. So before the FIA could escalate further, the team voluntarily removed the original version. Engineers then redesigned the concept with softer shapes and less aggressive aerodynamic surfaces. The objective was simple: keep the performance, reduce the political pressure. And then Miami exposed something nobody expected. Lewis Hamilton used the updated halo wing. Charles Leclerc did not. That detail instantly shocked people inside the paddock. Because when two drivers inside the same top team disagree on using a new upgrade, it usually means uncertainty exists somewhere behind the scenes. Maybe the gain was not convincing enough. Or maybe the FIA pressure had already become serious enough to create hesitation inside Ferrari itself. And honestly, that second possibility is what terrified the team most. Because once political pressure enters Formula One, development changes immediately. Engineers become cautious. Drivers lose confidence. Long-term planning becomes unstable. And Ferrari cannot afford instability right now. Especially because the halo wing was never the real fear inside Maranello. The real fear was what the FIA might target next. The real nightmare for Ferrari was never the halo wing alone. It was the possibility that the FIA would start looking deeper into the entire philosophy of the SF26. And now, that is exactly what appears to be happening. Because once the FIA questioned Ferrari's halo concept, attention inside the paddock immediately shifted toward another innovation that may be even more important: the blown exhaust system. And according to reports coming out of Miami, this is the upgrade truly terrifying Ferrari right now. Because unlike the halo wing, the blown exhaust is not just a small aerodynamic detail attached to the car. It is deeply connected to almost everything the SF26 does well: rear stability, corner exits, traction under acceleration, tire temperature control, aerodynamic efficiency on straights. Everything works together around this concept. And that is why the numbers now being discussed inside Formula One are so frightening. Reports suggest Ferrari could lose almost half a second per lap if the blown exhaust eventually disappears completely. Half a second. That is enormous in modern Formula One. Sometimes the difference between pole position and the middle of the grid is less than 1 second total. Remove half a second from a car, and suddenly a front row contender becomes a midfield team almost overnight. That is the scale of Ferrari's fear right now. Because Ferrari did not just copy this idea from another team. They invented it. That detail matters massively. Other teams only started moving toward similar concepts after Ferrari revealed how effective the system could be. Mercedes explored versions of it. McLaren adapted around similar ideas. Red Bull investigated alternatives built on the same philosophy. But Ferrari developed the SF26 around this system from the very beginning. And that changes everything. Because removing the blown exhaust would not simply reduce performance slightly. It could destabilize the entire behavior of the car. The airflow structures around the rear evolved together with the system. The aerodynamic balance evolved together with it. Setup philosophy evolved together with it. Everything connects. Imagine removing the foundation from a skyscraper after the upper floors are already finished. Even if the building stays standing, instability spreads through the entire structure. That is basically Ferrari's concern right now. And this is why the atmosphere inside Maranello is reportedly becoming so tense before Canada. Because while all this FIA pressure grows, Ferrari already has another major weakness they cannot fully hide anymore: engine power. According to reports, Ferrari may still be trailing Mercedes by somewhere between 21 and 30 horsepower. That is devastating at a circuit like Montreal. Canada punishes weak acceleration brutally. Long straights, heavy braking zones, constant full throttle sections where horsepower matters every single lap. So Ferrari compensated by maximizing aerodynamic efficiency. That was the strategy. And now the FIA is targeting the exact systems helping Ferrari survive that engine deficit. That is why Fred Vasseur is reportedly furious behind closed doors. Because from Ferrari's perspective, the team followed the regulations exactly as written. They identified the loophole first. They invested first. They accepted the risks first. Then rivals copied the concepts. And only after the rest of the grid started adapting, the FIA began moving toward restrictions. Inside Ferrari, that sequence feels deeply unfair. Especially because banning the blown exhaust during the current season is politically complicated. What? Because too many teams now benefit from similar systems themselves. Mercedes benefits. McLaren benefits. Alpine benefits. Williams benefits. Even Cadillac reportedly moved toward similar solutions. Suddenly the entire paddock is trapped in a contradiction nobody wants to admit publicly. Teams complain about Ferrari's innovation, while quietly using versions of it themselves. And that creates a political war happening behind closed doors right now. Because if the FIA pushes too aggressively, they risk upsetting multiple teams at once. But if they do nothing, Ferrari's rivals fear Maranello may continue building an advantage around concepts they discovered before everyone else. And meanwhile, Ferrari still faces another problem quietly damaging confidence inside the factory: the simulator crisis. Reports indicate Ferrari continues struggling with correlation between simulator predictions and real-world track performance. That may sound technical. It is actually terrifying for a Formula One team. because it means engineers cannot fully trust whether upgrades will behave correctly once the car reaches the circuit. Imagine trying to navigate through a city using a map that changes shape every few minutes. That is basically Ferrari's development situation right now. And suddenly, every decision becomes dangerous. Do they continue investing heavily into systems the FIA may ban? Do they redesign major parts of the car early? Do they gamble on future regulation changes? Every option carries risk. And with Canada approaching fast, Ferrari is running out of time to choose correctly. Canada was supposed to bring Ferrari answers. Instead, it may expose how fragile the entire SF26 project really is. Because behind all the innovation, all the political tension, and all the FIA pressure, there is one reality Ferrari still cannot escape. The car may not be fast enough without these systems. That is the fear spreading quietly through the paddock right now. Even with the blown exhaust, even with the halo wing, even with the Miami upgrades, reports still suggest Ferrari sits somewhere between the third and fourth fastest package overall. Fast enough for podiums. Fast enough for occasional pole positions. But maybe not fast enough to survive losing the innovations that made the SF26 special in the first place. And that changes the emotional pressure inside Ferrari completely. Because now, every single race weekend feels bigger than racing. Every upgrade becomes political. Every setup choice becomes risky. Every FIA discussion feels personal. And this is where Formula One starts becoming psychological. Because confidence controls everything at this level. Drivers attack corners differently when they fully trust the car. Engineers develop more aggressively when they trust the direction of the project. Teams take strategic risks when they believe momentum is on their side. Ferrari right now does not have that stability. Instead, they are trapped between two different futures. One future says the FIA restrictions will eventually destroy the concepts that made the SF26 competitive. The other says Ferrari must keep pushing aggressively anyway, because slowing down now guarantees defeat later. That internal tension is incredibly dangerous, especially inside a team like Ferrari, where pressure already exists every single day, and rivals can sense it. Mercedes continues building around raw engine strength. McLaren keeps improving consistency almost every weekend. Red Bull remains dangerous whenever race conditions become chaotic. Meanwhile, Ferrari keeps waking up to new uncertainty every week. Will the FIA tighten the rules further? Will more technical directives appear after Canada? Will rivals push harder politically behind closed doors? And maybe most importantly of all, will Ferrari finally receive help through the ADUO process after Canada? That point could change the entire second half of the season. Because according to reports, Ferrari believes their engine deficit may exceed the threshold required for regulatory assistance. If the FIA confirms that after Canada, Ferrari could finally unlock major power unit improvements outside the normal restrictions. And suddenly the entire championship picture changes again. That possibility is the one thing still giving Ferrari hope. Because aerodynamic loopholes can disappear overnight. Political pressure can destroy development momentum. But horsepower changes everything, especially in modern Formula One. And that is why Canada suddenly feels much bigger than a normal race weekend. This is no longer just about lap times. It is about survival. Survival of Ferrari's technical philosophy. Survival of the SF26 development direction. Maybe even survival of Fred Vasseur's long-term project itself. Because if Ferrari performs strongly in Canada despite all this FIA pressure, the team proves something very important. That the car still has genuine pace underneath the controversy. But if performance drops, the entire paddock will immediately start asking the question Ferrari desperately wants to avoid. How much of Ferrari's speed came from innovations Formula One no longer wants to exist? And honestly, that question may terrify Ferrari more than any rival car on the grid. Because once doubt enters Formula One, it spreads fast. Drivers begin questioning confidence. Engineers begin questioning concepts. Management begins questioning strategy. And fans begin questioning the future. That is the atmosphere Ferrari arrives with before Canada. Not calm. Not certainty. Pressure. Technical pressure. Political pressure. Championship pressure. And maybe the biggest irony of all is this. Ferrari finally became aggressive enough to scare Formula One again. And that may be exactly why Formula One is now trying to stop them.